I've been driving 18-wheelers across the Nevada desert for 15 years now. In that time, I've seen mirages that looked real enough to touch, dust storms that turned day into night, and heat waves that made the asphalt shimmer like water. I thought I'd seen everything this stretch of highway had to offer. I was wrong. My name is Marcus Webb, and I run freight between Reno and Las Vegas 3 times a week. It's monotonous work, 12 hours of straight road, scattered gas stations, and the occasional tumbleweed. Most drivers hate the isolation, but I've always found it peaceful. Just me, my rig, and the endless desert horizon. That peace shattered on a Tuesday night in late September when I picked up my first passenger. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that made the desert look like it was on fire. I was about 60 miles past Tonopah, right in that dead zone where there's nothing but sand and scrub brush for miles in every direction. My headlights cut through the growing darkness, and that's when I saw him. A man stood on the shoulder of the highway, one arm extended with his thumb out. The classic hitchhiker pose. I'd passed hundreds of hitchhikers over the years and never stopped for any of them. Company policy strictly forbids picking up passengers, and I'd heard too many horror stories about drivers who'd been robbed or worse. But something about this guy made me slow down. Maybe it was how isolated we were. Maybe it was the fact that the nearest town was 40 miles behind me and 60 miles ahead. Maybe it was because he looked so desperate, standing there in the middle of nowhere as darkness fell. Whatever the reason, I found my foot pressing the brake pedal, and my rig began to slow. As I pulled onto the shoulder, my headlights illuminated him fully. He was tall and gaunt, maybe 6'2", but couldn't have weighed more than 150. He wore a suit, dark gray or black. It was hard to tell in the fading light, but it was torn and dirty, like he'd been wearing it for days. His face was pale, almost gray, with sunken cheeks and hollow eyes that seemed to stare right through me. His dark hair was disheveled, hanging limply across his forehead. I rolled down my passenger window. "Need a lift?" He didn't answer. Just stood there, staring at me with those empty eyes. Then, slowly, he raised one thin arm and pointed straight ahead, down the highway into the darkness. "Where you headed?" I asked. Still nothing. Just that pointing finger, steady as a compass needle. I should have driven away right then. Everything about the situation felt wrong. The silence, the stare, the pointing. But I'd already stopped, and leaving him out there in the desert night seemed cruel. "All right," I said. "Hop in. I'm going as far as Las Vegas." He moved to the passenger door with surprising speed, considering how frail he looked. I heard the door open and felt the cab shift slightly as he climbed in. The door closed, and suddenly he was sitting in my passenger seat, that thin finger still pointing ahead. "You can put your hand down now," I said, trying to inject some humor into the situation. "I know which way to go." He lowered his arm but said nothing. Just stared straight ahead through the windshield. I put the rig back in gear and pulled onto the highway. "Name's Marcus," I offered. "What's yours?" Silence. "Strong, silent type, huh?" I glanced over at him. In the glow of the dashboard lights, his face looked even more hollow, the shadows pooling in his eye sockets like dark water. "That's fine. Don't have to talk if you don't want to." We drove in silence for the next 3 hours. I tried making conversation a few more times, asked where he was from, where he was going, if he was hungry. Nothing. He just sat there, motionless, staring ahead. At one point, I turned on the radio, but all I got was static. I fiddled with the dial, but every station was just white noise. Weird, considering I'd had perfect reception on this route just a few days earlier. Finally, around 11 p.m., he moved. That thin arm came up again, pointing toward the side of the road. I could see it in the distance, an old gas station, dark and clearly abandoned. The kind of place that had probably been out of business since the 80s. "That where you want to stop?" I asked. He nodded. Just once, a slow dip of his chin. I pulled off the highway and into the gas station's cracked parking lot. The place was a relic. 2 ancient pumps that probably hadn't worked in decades, a small building with boarded-up windows, and a sign so faded I couldn't make out what it had once said. Tumbleweeds had collected against the walls, and sand had drifted across the concrete like small dunes. I brought the rig to a stop. "This is it." He was already opening the door. The cab light came on, and I got my first really good look at him. His suit was worse than I'd thought, not just dirty but actually torn in places, with the fabric hanging in strips from his arms. His skin had a strange, waxy quality to it, and his eyes, they weren't just hollow. They were empty, like looking into two dark wells. He climbed out without a word, closed the door, and walked toward the abandoned building. I watched him go, his thin figure moving across the parking lot until the darkness swallowed him up. I sat there for a moment, engine idling, feeling like I'd just experienced something deeply strange but not quite able to put my finger on what. Finally, I shook my head, put the rig back in gear, and pulled back onto the highway. I chalked the whole thing up to one of those weird encounters you have on the road sometimes. Memorable but ultimately meaningless. I was wrong about the meaningless part. 3 weeks later, I picked him up again. Same spot, same time of night, same pale figure standing on the shoulder with his thumb out. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Couldn't be the same guy, right? But as my headlights swept over him, there was no mistaking it. Same torn suit, same gaunt face, same hollow eyes. This time, I hesitated. Something felt very wrong about this. The odds of encountering the same hitchhiker in the exact same spot, 3 weeks apart, in the middle of the Nevada desert? Astronomical. But I was already slowing down, like my foot was moving independent of my brain. I pulled over. He climbed in without waiting for an invitation, settling into the passenger seat with that same eerie silence. The cab suddenly felt colder, despite the warm desert night. And again, after 3 hours of driving in complete silence, he raised that thin arm and pointed to the abandoned gas station. I let him off, watched him disappear into the darkness, and drove away feeling like I'd just stepped through a loop in reality. The third time it happened, I was ready. Well, I thought I was ready. Same timeline, 3 weeks later, same location, same hitchhiker. But this time, I'd armed myself with questions and observations. This time, I was going to figure out what was going on. He climbed into the cab, and I immediately noticed something that made my skin crawl. In the light from the overhead cab light, I could see the seat behind him clearly. Through him. Not around him. Through him. It was subtle, like looking through tinted glass, but definitely there. I blinked hard, thinking it must be my tired eyes playing tricks, but the effect persisted. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk. This is the third time I've picked you up in the same spot. What's going on?" No response. Just that empty stare. "Come on, man. Give me something. A name, a destination, anything." Nothing. I started driving, but this time I was paying attention. Real attention. And that's when I started noticing things that should have been obvious from the beginning. The passenger seat had a thin layer of dust on it. I'd seen it when I climbed into the cab that morning and had meant to wipe it down but forgot. That dust should have been disturbed by him sitting there, should have shown the imprint of his body. But when I glanced over, the dust was undisturbed, as if he weighed nothing at all. I looked down at the floor mat beneath his feet. Earlier that day, I'd spilled some coffee, and the mat was still damp. If he'd stepped in it, there should be footprints. There weren't any. The wet patch looked exactly as it had before he got in. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I adjusted the rearview mirror, angling it to get a better look at him. The mirror showed the passenger seat, the window behind it, the darkness outside. It didn't show him. He wasn't in the reflection. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. I jerked the wheel, pulling the truck onto the shoulder so suddenly that the whole rig shuddered. My heart was hammering in my chest. I turned to look directly at him, and he was there. Solid, physical, real. But the mirror showed an empty seat. The dust beneath him was undisturbed. And now that I was really looking, I could see that he cast no shadow, despite the bright glow of the dashboard lights. "What are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. For the first time in all our encounters, his expression changed. His head turned slowly toward me, those hollow eyes fixing on my face. His mouth opened, and I thought he was finally going to speak. But no sound came out, just a faint exhale, like wind through a tunnel. Then his arm came up, that thin finger pointing ahead with what seemed like desperate urgency. I don't know why I started driving again. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe some part of me understood that whatever was happening, I needed to see it through to the end. I pulled back onto the highway and drove those 3 hours in silence, my mind racing, my heart refusing to slow down. When he pointed to the abandoned gas station, I was almost relieved. At least this part followed the pattern. I pulled into the parking lot, but this time, when he opened the door to leave, I called out to him. "Wait." He paused, 1 foot already on the ground. "I'm going to figure this out," I said. "Whatever's happening here, whatever you are, I'm going to understand it." He looked back at me, and for just a moment, I saw something in those empty eyes. Sadness, maybe. Or warning. Then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness like smoke. I sat there in my idling truck, staring at the abandoned gas station. Then I made a decision. I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket, killed the engine, and climbed down from the cab. The desert night was quiet except for the ticking of my cooling engine and the distant howl of wind across the sand. The gas station looked even worse up close. The concrete was cracked and buckled, with weeds growing through the gaps. The pumps were rusted hulks, their hoses long since rotted away. The building's windows were boarded up, the wood gray and splintered with age. A faded sign hung by one corner, creaking in the breeze. I approached the main building, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The door was locked, but the wood frame was so rotted that a solid kick splintered it open. The door swung inward with a groan of rusty hinges. The interior was exactly what you'd expect from a place abandoned for decades. Shelves still lined the walls, but they were empty except for dust and the mummified remains of insects. The counter was covered in sand that had blown in through cracks in the walls. Everything was gray and desiccated, like the life had been sucked out of it years ago. My flashlight beam swept across the space, and something caught my eye. Behind the counter, pinned to a bulletin board so old the cork was crumbling, were papers. I moved closer, carefully stepping over debris, and focused my light on them. Newspaper clippings. Yellowed with age, the paper brittle and fragile. I leaned in to read the headlines. Local man missing, presumed dead. The article was dated October 15, 1987. The accompanying photo showed a man, young, maybe 30, wearing a suit. Despite the poor quality of the newspaper photo, I recognized him immediately. The same gaunt face, the same hollow eyes, the same dark suit. My hitchhiker. I read the article with trembling hands. His name was Thomas Whitmore. He'd been a traveling salesman, driving between Reno and Las Vegas. On October 13, 1987, he'd stopped at this gas station to fill up. The attendant remembered him because it was late, nearly midnight, and they rarely got customers that late. Thomas had seemed agitated, kept looking over his shoulder like he expected someone to follow him inside. He'd paid for his gas and left. His car was found 3 days later, abandoned on the side of the highway about 60 miles north of here, right where I'd been picking him up. He was never seen again. I moved to the next clipping. This one was from a week later, an update on the case. No leads, no witnesses, no trace of Thomas Whitmore. The search had been called off. He was declared legally dead a year later. There were more clippings, follow-ups, anniversary pieces, a memorial article from 5 years later. Each one included the same photo of Thomas in his suit, that haunted look in his eyes. At the bottom of the bulletin board was something else. Another photo, but this one wasn't from a newspaper. It was an old Polaroid, the colors faded to sepia tones. It showed this gas station, back when it was still in business. The pumps were new, the building freshly painted. And in the parking lot, clear as day, was a truck. An 18-wheeler. My 18-wheeler. I ripped the photo down from the board, holding it close to my flashlight. There was no mistaking it. Same model, same company logo on the side, same license plate number. My truck, photographed in 1987, 5 years before I was even born, 15 years before I started driving routes through Nevada. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the photo. This was impossible. Completely, utterly impossible. But I was holding the evidence right there in my trembling fingers. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling. The flashlight beam swung wildly around the abandoned station, and that's when I saw them. More photos, pinned to the walls, tucked into the spaces between shelves, lying on the counter. Dozens of Polaroids, all showing the same thing. My truck, parked in this lot, from every conceivable angle. Some showed it during the day, some at night. Some from the side, some from the front. All dated October 1987. In several of them, if you looked closely, you could see a figure in the driver's seat. Dark hair, broad shoulders, wearing a trucker's cap. Me. Somehow, impossibly, me. I backed toward the door, my breath coming in short gasps. None of this made sense. I wasn't alive in 1987. I hadn't started driving trucks until 2010. This was insane. This was... A sound behind me made me spin around. The door to a back room, one I hadn't noticed before, stood open. It had definitely been closed when I came in. Beyond it was darkness, deep and absolute, that seemed to swallow my flashlight beam. Hello. My voice sounded small and frightened. No answer. But I could feel something in that darkness. A presence. Watching. Waiting. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to get back to my truck and drive away as fast as possible. But I couldn't. I needed answers. I needed to understand what was happening. I approached the doorway slowly, flashlight held out in front of me like a weapon. The beam penetrated maybe 5 feet into the darkness before being absorbed by it completely. I stepped through. The room beyond was larger than it should have been. Much larger. The gas station building hadn't looked big enough from the outside to contain a space this size, but here it was, a vast, dark chamber that my flashlight couldn't find the edges of. The air was cold here, much colder than the desert night had any right to be, and it smelled of dust and time and something else. Something wrong. Thomas. I called out. Thomas Whitmore. My voice echoed back to me, distorted, like it had traveled a great distance before returning. Then I saw him. Or rather, I saw them. Figures in the darkness, just beyond the reach of my light. Dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe. All standing perfectly still, all facing me. As my eyes adjusted, I could make out details. They were all wearing clothes from different eras, 70s, 80s, 60s, even older. All of them looked gaunt and hollow, like Thomas. All of them had that same empty stare. What is this place? I whispered. One of the figures moved forward, stepping into my light. It was Thomas. He raised that thin arm one more time, but this time he wasn't pointing ahead. He was pointing behind me, toward the door I'd come through. Leave, his gesture said. Get out while you can. What happened to you? I asked. What happened to all of you? He opened his mouth, and this time, sound came out. It was faint, like wine through dead leaves, but I could make out words. Taken, he whispered. The road takes us. Replays us. Uses us. I don't understand. The loop, another voice said, female this time, coming from deeper in the darkness. The desert loop. It catches travelers. Plays their last moments again and again. You've seen your truck in those photos. You've seen yourself. That's impossible, I said, but even as I spoke the words, I knew they were hollow. I'd seen the evidence. I'd felt the wrongness. I wasn't alive in 1987. Not yet, Thomas said, and those 2 words sent ice water through my veins. But you will be. You'll come back. You always come back. The loop brings you back, makes you pick us up, drives you here. Again and again. We're trapped in our moments, and you're becoming trapped in yours. I backed away from them, my mind refusing to accept what I was hearing. No, this is crazy. Time doesn't work like that. The desert is old, Thomas said, stepping closer. The other figures began to move too, a slow shuffling advance. Older than man. Older than time as you understand it. There are places where reality is thin, where the rules break down. This highway is one of them. This station is the center. We got caught in it, and now you're getting caught too. How do I stop it? I demanded, still backing away. How do I break the loop? You can't, the female voice said, sad and final. Once it starts, it never ends. You'll drive this route. You'll see us. You'll stop here. And eventually, you'll join us, stuck in your last moment, repeating it forever. I turned and ran. Ran like I'd never run in my life, my flashlight beam bouncing crazily as I sprinted through the abandoned station. Behind me, I could hear them, not chasing, just standing there, watching me flee with those empty eyes. I burst through the door, across the parking lot, and practically threw myself into my truck's cab. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I jammed the transmission into gear, pulling out of that parking lot with my tires spitting gravel. I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. I drove straight through to Las Vegas, breaking every speed limit, my mind racing faster than my truck. None of it made sense. Time loops. The desert replaying moments. My truck existing in 1987. But I'd seen the proof. I'd felt the wrongness. And I'd heard their warning. When I finally reached Vegas and pulled into the company lot, the sun was rising. I sat in my cab, exhausted, terrified, and deeply unsure about what to do next. Call someone? Tell them what? That I'd picked up a ghost? That I'd found photos of my truck from before I was born? That I was trapped in some kind of time loop on a desert highway? I decided to do what I always did when things got complicated. I went home, slept for 12 hours, and tried to pretend it had all been a nightmare brought on by too much coffee and too little sleep. For 3 weeks, I refused to take any routes through that section of highway. I requested different assignments, traded with other drivers, called in sick twice. My supervisor started asking questions about my reliability. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't drive that road again. Then came the night I ran out of options. A priority shipment, mandatory overtime, and I was the only driver available. The route? Reno to Las Vegas. Straight through the desert, right past that section of highway, right past that abandoned gas station. I can't, I told my supervisor. You can, and you will, he said. Or you can find another job. Your choice. So I drove. What else could I do? I drove out of Reno as the sun set, turning the desert into that familiar landscape of fire and shadow. My hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. My eyes kept darting to the side of the road, watching for that familiar gaunt figure. 60 miles past Tonopah, right on schedule, there he was. Thomas Whitmore, thumb out, that torn suit hanging off his thin frame. My foot moved to the brake before my brain could stop it. I pulled over. He climbed in. And as we drove in silence toward that abandoned gas station, I realized the truth. The loop had me. It had always had me. From the moment I'd first seen him on the roadside, maybe even before that, I'd been caught in it. The photos from 1987 weren't impossible. They were inevitable. Somehow, someway, the desert would pull me back, make me drive this route at that time, make me stop at that station. I was seeing my own future, or past, I wasn't even sure anymore. Time had become a flat circle, and I was just going around and around on it. When we reached the gas station, Thomas pointed, and I stopped. Before he got out, I grabbed his arm. My hand passed right through it, meeting no resistance, feeling only cold. Is there really no way out? I asked. He looked at me with those hollow eyes, and I saw the answer there. Then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness like he always did. I sat there for a long moment, engine idling, staring at that abandoned building. I thought about just driving away, never taking this route again, moving to a different state, finding a different career. But even as I thought it, I knew it wouldn't matter. The loop would find me. It always found its travelers. I put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. In 3 weeks, I'd be here again. In 3 weeks, I'd pick him up again. And eventually, maybe tomorrow, maybe years from now, maybe decades ago in 1987, I'd become one of those hollow-eyed figures standing in that dark room, trapped in my last moment, watching other travelers stumble into the same trap. The desert is old, Thomas had said. Older than time as you understand it. And now I'm part of it, caught in its loop, replaying my moment again and again. I'll pick up Thomas Whitmore next month, and the month after that, and the month after that. And someday, someone will pick me up on this highway, and they'll notice that I cast no shadow, that I leave no footprints, that I don't appear in their mirror. They'll drive me to that abandoned gas station, and I'll point them toward their fate just like Thomas pointed me toward mine. Because that's what the loop does. It takes travelers, replays them, uses them. And once you're in it, you never, ever get out. I'm still driving this route. I still pick him up every 3 weeks. I've stopped fighting it. What's the point? The desert has me now, and it's never letting go. So if you're ever driving through Nevada, late at night, and you see a figure on the side of the road, a man in a torn suit with hollow eyes and a pointing finger, do yourself a favor. Don't stop. Don't pick him up. Keep driving, and don't look back. Because that's the thing about loops. They're always looking for new travelers to pull in. And the desert is always hungry. If this story made you check your rearview mirror a little more carefully, hit that like button and subscribe to Dark Stories by Ezra. Every week, I bring you accounts from the edges of reality where the ordinary becomes terrifying. Next week's story involves something that follows people home from the ocean. You won't want to miss it. Until then, drive safe, and never pick up hitchhikers in the desert. Trust me on that one.